Hi everyone, and welcome to ELT Coffee Chats. I'm Raffaella Manzo, teacher trainer, course creator, and founder of ProTEFL Institute. ELT Coffee Chats is a space where ELT professionals come together to share ideas or practical insights from across their profession. The aim is very simple, so honest conversations and practical takeaways and from people working in ELT around the world. So grab a coffee and let's dive in. So for our very first episode, I'm so delighted to be joined by Christian Petrillo. Hi, Christian.
Hello, good morning. How are you?
I'm great. And you? How are you doing?
Very good. Surviving with the very warm, very hot temperatures in Italy now. All
I
across Europe.
I feel you. So Christian is an English teacher, and today we'll explore why pronunciation matters, some common misconceptions around teaching it, and practical ways to integrate it into everyday lessons. So Christian, welcome to ELT Coffee Chats. But before diving into pronunciation, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you found your way into ELT?
Absolutely. So thank you so very much, Raffaella, for this opportunity. I'm very honored to be your first guest on this really wonderful space. A little bit about myself. I am from the United States. I was born and raised in Philadelphia, but my father is from Italy. He came to the United States as a child. I was not raised in a bilingual household per se, but I spent most of the summers as an adolescent from middle school and onward in Italy. So I learned Italian at a pretty young age. And from there, I was exposed to different languages and became really passionate about not only languages, but culture. So I studied three languages in university: German, Russian, and Persian, all very different languages. But having this experience and having been exposed to different methods of linguistic pedagogy, I really wanted to pursue a career as a teacher after my university education, which brought me through many countries and many different experiences, including in Ukraine, Turkey, Azerbaijan, and lately, of course, in Italy. And it's been really an exciting experience to share my language, my culture with people from around the world. And I'm hoping we can talk more about that today, especially through the topic of pronunciation, which is super important for students all around the world.
That'd be great. That'd be great, Christian. So, what got you first interested in pronunciation? I mean, was it something you always focused on, or did it come, from a particular classroom experience?
Actually, it came directly from multiple classroom experiences because I realized that a big Achilles heel for a lot of students of all levels, from beginner, intermediate, and even advanced students, was pronunciation, that they were not able to understand certain words or even certain phrases due to gaps in pronunciation. Maybe because they were pronouncing, maybe because rather that they had a sound in their mind of a certain word or a certain vowel sound, especially vowel sounds are very important here, but they were producing it in the incorrect way. So this created a lot of problems in their ability to comprehend. And from there on, I actually wanted to integrate pronunciation into my lessons because I understood that it was something super important and it shouldn't be ignored.
Yeah, well, actually, sometimes it is because many teachers say pronunciation is important, but rarely make time for it. So, why do you think it happens, and what misconceptions might be behind it?
Absolutely. Well, I think many teachers, English teachers in particular, and I would say native teachers, I don't want to generalize, but I would say there is probably the biggest example. They feel that they are not adequate to study, to learn and not to learn, but to teach pronunciation because they don't know maybe the whole entire IPA chart, or they're not familiar with the different sounds or the combinations. So they feel a little bit overwhelmed by it, so they ignore it. But I will reiterate this a lot today. You don't need to be an expert in IPA or in linguistics to teach pronunciation in a lesson. You can go a lot through patterns, you can go a lot through sounds, through repetition, through giving different exercises to students to make sure that they are pronouncing words correctly or sentences or phrases correctly. So I think a lot of it has to do with the fear of not being adequate, which is oftentimes what prevents teachers from doing certain things in their lessons.
Yeah. You're completely right. I know what you mean. So, what are some simple, practical ways teachers can weave pronunciation into a lesson? So, can you share some examples of how you've done it yourself?
hmm Absolutely. So, first of all, if you're working with a small group or even an individual lesson, you can definitely introduce pronunciation based on the situations that happen within the classroom. I wouldn't suggest going on starting with pronunciation right away when you first start with a group or with an individual class, because you want to see and analyze how the students react to pronunciation, how they're able to
Mhm.
reproduce certain sounds and words, of course. Uh, my first trick usually is by, if you notice and you take note as a teacher of the different mistakes that a student may make, you introduce it through different patterns, for example. So, one thing that I know a lot of Italian students have problems with are the short and long vowel sounds. So, one thing that I like to do is I like to create a little bit of a game with them and create a list of words that all have the same sound and have the students repeat them.
Okay.
I also like to, when I, over a short period of time, if students continue to make mistakes with pronunciation, I like to have them do certain exercises where they actually record themselves and they listen to themselves based on a
Mhm.
recording that I make for them so they can compare exactly in real time the sounds and how they reproduce the sounds. So it can start with something very simple just by creating certain patterns like words like um, green tea,
Mhm.
beach, peach, creating these certain sounds and patterns and having students be aware of them. And then also have them reproduce the sounds in some kind of audio recordings as well.
That's very useful. I think recording it's a very useful tip because you really don't. You're not aware of how you sound when you speak until you record yourself, which is, isn't
Mhm.
it? Yeah. So, but you mentioned before native speakers and their fear of teaching pronunciation somehow, but also non-native speakers, like teachers, feel unsure about teaching pronunciation sometimes. What would you say to help them feel more confident?
Well, I think it's very important that all teachers, all English teachers, feel confident in their ability to teach, because just because a teacher is a native teacher does not make them automatically the best English teacher. And this is also true with pronunciation as well. A non native teacher actually has a lot of advantages in teaching pronunciation, actually, because they themselves had to maybe do a bit of a deeper dive into the IPA sounds, had to study a bit more about the letter combinations that exist in English. So they may actually have a bit more of experience and more ability to actually teach these topics. Though at the same time, they may be a little bit concerned that, oh, well, my pronunciation isn't perfect. I'm not a native teacher. I think that when we're looking at teaching English, it's really important that we understand that English is a global language. It's not just a language of the United States, of the UK, and of other countries that are mainly English speaking. So there is nothing wrong with a non-native teacher teaching pronunciation. Again, I would consistently reiterate the fact that you can do these types of exercises with students. You can focus on single words, single sounds, and then eventually move into repeating and recording phrases with the students. So I wouldn't say that a non-native teacher cannot teach pronunciation. I think it's absolutely fine, and that actually they have some advantages actually in doing so.
Yeah, yes, exactly. That's, I think that's a shared, like a common fear with learners as well, because the idea that it is that pronunciation, it's somehow related to sounding native, the idea of sounding native. But It's not like that, is it? So it's more about being clear and communicative. So how can we help learners, understand that pronunciation has nothing to do with sounding native?
Well, exactly. And I find this quite interesting because when we talk about pronunciation, I have my own interesting stories from another perspective, from the Italian side, because my
Okay.
father is from Tuscany and I learned Italian in Tuscany mostly through my grandmother. And now I live in Venice, in the Veneto region, the area around Venice. And it's quite funny because when I speak Italian to people here, the first months that I were here, they would always say, okay, you're a foreigner, but you speak Tuscan. You have a Tuscan cadence in your Italian. So a lot of what our pronunciation, the way that we produce language, is based on our own experiences. And that's very beautiful. I find that to be something that is really amazing about language learning. And I wish that more teachers would embrace this actually than try to find this kind of, I don't know, one size fit all pronunciation or
Yeah.
reproduction of sounds and the language. Everyone has their own experience with the language, and it is something personal and something beautiful. So I don't think pronunciation should be focused on just making a student sound native, quote unquote, because even that term, what does native mean?
What
If
is
we're
native?
talking
Yeah,
about
yeah,
the
yeah. What's
United
the meaning of
States,
native? That's the
yes,
whole point.
if we're talking about the United States, that's a very deep question. But of course, it's important to make sure that students are able to not only comprehend the
Yeah.
sounds and but also to make themselves be understood. So when mistakes in pronunciation, for example, making mistakes with the schwa sound or not being able to differentiate between long and short vowel sounds, when this is becoming an error that is maybe fossilized in the student's
Hmm.
speech, it's important that the teacher does work on that. But the goal should be always for comprehension and understanding, not for sounding native per se.
Yeah. Okay. So forget BBC English.
Yeah, or anything that is just I mean, there is no such thing as perfect. Like
Yeah.
I feel that a lot of times students get very frustrated if they find themselves not reaching this perfection goal. It's okay to make mistakes. We should always make sure that our classrooms are places where students feel free to make mistakes, but see mistakes mostly as learning experiences as well.
Yes, absolutely. And now, if you had to leave teachers with just one practical tip for integrating pronunciation, what would it be?
Yeah, so I do notice that a lot of teachers, like as we mentioned before, they are a bit afraid of introducing or integrating pronunciation into their lessons. But I would say that again, if you're starting off with a class or with an individual student, I would say wait until maybe the third or fourth session to introduce pronunciation, because also from the student's perspective, they're also afraid of pronunciation, and maybe starting there right away can be a little bit daunting and make them a little bit scared at the beginning, and we don't want to do that, of course, with our
No,
students.
absolutely.
But maybe by the third or fourth session, you can introduce pronunciation. If you have, for example, a 60-minute class or 60-minute lesson, try to dedicate between 5 to 10 minutes to pronunciation and just start very easily. Just start very easily by looking at maybe some of the words, maybe they are the vocabulary words or words that came across in the lesson, and just go over and repeat them and have the student understand, okay, this is the pronunciation, and maybe highlight certain sounds that you would like to really focus on for that session. It could be, for example, the long E and the short I sound. We know that's a really common problem. For example, live versus live. I know that a lot of students all over the world struggle with, oh, well, why? They're spelled the same, but they have this different pronunciation. Just something like that can be a little bit of a start to talk about it and to have the students start thinking about it. And one thing that I realized, I actually did this quite recently with students, was when I started talking about pronunciation, they started thinking about it too, and they became more
Yes,
aware of it. And they were
absolutely.
really interested in understanding, okay, now I understand this sound, and now I'm not going to make a mistake with it, and now I know when to use it and when not to. So my biggest tip would be just start small, 5 to 10 minutes, just maybe 2 words, just a little short explanation. This is this sound, this is that sound. They are often confused. Have them do some practice, but start small. You don't have to overwhelm yourself or the student.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's what you said is completely correct because it's the way how brain works. So you start recognizing things, generally speaking, I'm not talking just about the language or foreign languages, when you know they exist. If you're aware that certain sounds exist, then it's easier for you to recognize these sounds also in other words or when you read. And also you kind of are able to figure out the different patterns, the different clusters of letters, then make a particular sound in that language. Because if you work mainly, I guess, with Italian people, so but
Mhm.
that's
At the
definitely,
moment, yes.
yeah, it changes with different students coming from different places, of course, because every language has its own patterns, its own sounds, its own vowels, and so, well, the vowels are the same, but the same vowel, different vowel sounds. I mean, so yes, I think it's very interesting, underlining, highlighting this idea that when you study something, you become more aware of something, and it's easier for you to use it. So it's not just this is the IPA chart and learn it by heart. It's not like that.
Yes, absolutely. And also, one thing that I have integrated in a lot of my lessons is, especially with the vowels, rather than giving the students the IPA chart, which, you know, especially if you're working with students of a certain age, who I would say students who have a past studying academic English in, high school or university, but maybe are a bit rusty, and now they find themselves later on in their career that they need English. Giving them something like the IPA chart is like, it's like telling them everything you've done to this point in your life has been wrong. And they look at it and they look devastated. And I understand, because I mean, you have to put yourself in their shoes and understand exactly
Yeah.
what they're thinking. So I try to avoid giving the students the IPA chart. I will show them the symbols when I have to. But there's a really amazing tool, which actually you had introduced to me some years ago, which is the color vowel chart. That
Yeah,
is absolutely amazing.
it
If
is.
Because rather than students having to learn a new symbol and having to remember the symbol, it's completely interactive and works. It works with the students, really their memory, that they
Mhm.
can understand. Okay, this sound is associated with this color, and every time that I have students do, I have them work with the color vowel chart, they will always say to me, this word is a green T, for example, a long E. They'll come back and say that, and it sticks in their memory like this. So it's an amazing tool. The color vowel
Okay.
chart, for the vowels, I find it to be extremely helpful. And you can go on the site and play around with it yourself if you're a teacher, but it's really useful in the lessons rather than giving the students just the IPA chart.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Agree, agree. And just last question, Kristen, for you. So looking ahead, what is one thing you would love to see change in the way pronunciation is taught in ELT?
Yeah, so a lot of things, obviously, because it is quite avoided in the normal English course. We a lot of English courses focus simply on, well, I think the new trend is a lot of courses focus on communication, on speaking. They want students just to speak and not study grammar rules and not study vocabulary charts and whatnot, which I understand. I mean, that's a lot of the goals of the students. The main goal of most students is to speak, but at the same time, it's important to not forget the basics. It's like if you don't put salt in certain food, it's not going to taste good. You can have the best ingredients, but you need something that puts it together and that makes all of the ingredients speak for themselves. And pronunciation is really a part of that. If we cannot, if we cannot teach the students to pronounce well and to understand the different sounds of the English language, they will be lacking something very important, something very crucial. So I would like to see pronunciation more integrated in the courses. I think that there are, today with all of the tools of technology that we have, I think it would be amazing to see students do more practice, recording themselves. I know also I've seen, I don't know how I feel about this, but that there are now AI ELT platforms where students can speak to these robots practically and try to reproduce certain sounds, words, and phrases in conversations. That will totally change the whole entire discourse on native teachers, because now we'll be talking to robots. But I think it's really important that teachers are not afraid to go over these topics. And like I said, you can start small. There are plenty of tools out there, like the color vowel chart. You don't have to feel overwhelmed or not adequate, even if you're a non-native teacher. I think non-native teachers have a great advantage in teaching pronunciation. And just to go for it, I think that it should be definitely more integrated in the English language courses.
Thank you, Christian. This is the end of our first episode, and I just thank you so much for being here today. It's been like a pleasure talking to you. And thank you to everyone who joined us for this first episode of ELT Coffee Chat. I hope you've come away with a few ideas and something to reflect on in your own teaching. So until next time, thanks for listening and take care.
Thank you so much.